Pembroke. History seems to be repeating itself. Canadians will recall that here we are again after having debated Bill C-10 last spring, now debating its replacement, Bill C-11. The new Heritage Minister will try to tell Canadians that he has fixed the problems that existed in the former legislation. However, this is an extremely misleading statement. My time is short, so I'm going to cut to the chase. The government claims that this bill is about supporting Canadian culture and leveling the playing field. I would like to see Canadian culture promoted and celebrated, so let's explore that for a moment. I have two questions. One, is this bill about meeting Canadians where they're at in the 21st century and celebrating the amazing work that is being done by digital-first creators to produce Canadian content and enhance culture in their very own unique way? Or is this bill about the government imposing its definition of Canadian content in order to fulfill a government-driven agenda? Second question, will this bill truly level the playing field, or will it be used as a cash grab where those who have worked hard to expand their viewership and therefore generate revenue are forced to subsidize the traditional media industry, which is producing content for which there is little to no demand? So I realize these questions make the government uncomfortable, but they must be asked in order to understand this legislation. My grandparents, they weren't required to subsidize horse and buggy when cars became an alternative. Society moved forward in an innovative way because it just made sense. In effect, Bill C-11 will put in place an internet czar, the CRTC, which will govern how easily creators, those who post, are able to make their content accessible online to those of us who view it. In other words, it will impact what Canadians can and cannot access. It's an act of censorship. The internet is a vast, infinite, and magical space where all Canadians, no matter their background, are able to post and engage. In the new public square where we engage with one another, we do it through writing and audio and visual arts. For many Canadians, socializing online is the new norm. If passed, Bill C-11 will thwart our freedom in this new space. Again, the minister will try to tell you that all the problems have been fixed. He will point to convoluted parts of the bill in order to try to prove his point. But here's the thing. If the minister is telling the truth and has nothing to hide, why isn't the bill crystal clear? Why has the Liberal government chosen to use muddy language by placing exceptions within exceptions in order to confuse people? There are many flaws in Bill C-11, but I will focus on three of them today. One, the overabundance of power that it places in the hands of the CRTC, otherwise known as the Internet Czar. Two, its negative impact on creators. And three, how it negatively impacts viewers. If passed, this bill will give the Internet Czar, the CRTC, almost unlimited power in order to regulate the internet. Talk about an attack on freedom. The CRTC could have been given very specific, very narrow guidelines, but the government chose to give them free rein, to amend, to exempt, to include. The Liberals claim that bringing more government intervention, this is an interesting one, will boost Canadian culture, but that's not true. I mean, tell me a time in history where more red tape and regulation has increased innovation and incentivized artistic creation and brought about prosperity. You can't, because it doesn't, ever. Let's talk about creators. One of the biggest complaints that we heard from digital-first creators last time was that the bill would regulate their content online. Think TikTok, Snapchat, Twitch, podcasts, and YouTube. And yes, even cat videos. Now, the minister will claim once again that he fixed it by adding 4.1 back into the bill. But the problem is section 4.1 is immediately followed by subsection 2, which creates exceptions that nullify 4.1. It's pretzel logic, it's confusing, purposefully muddy. Michael Geist, a law professor at the University of Ottawa, where he holds the Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce law, seems qualified, has pointed out that under the Act, digital-first creators can be described as broadcasters and therefore forced to comply with the CRTC regulations. In other words, essentially any audio-visual material can be brought under the scope of this bill, not just large streaming platforms, individuals who use music. And the member opposite actually even clarified this in her own speech earlier. So this means that TikTok videos, which essentially always use music, and YouTube videos, which mostly use music, will in fact be captured under this legislation. So this means creators, right off the top of their revenue, will have to pay 30% into an art fund. Now they have to pay in, but they don't get to pull out. Secondly, it means that the content of digital-first creators will be assessed based on how Canadian it is. The CRTC, the Internet Czar, will of course make this conclusion. And of course that material then will be promoted or demoted accordingly. The minister will try to tell Canadians that what I'm saying isn't true, that only big companies such as Netflix and Disney will be caught by this legislation. But if that's the case, again, I would ask, why not just clarify that? Why not just say it outright? You don't. The bill doesn't. It's purposefully muddy. Now, let me talk about the negative impact that this bill will have on viewers. You, me, Canadians. Imagine going on YouTube to look for videos on Black voices, but instead you're showing a bunch of videos having to do with hockey in Canada. Now, you've never searched for hockey before, but all of a sudden those are the videos that are being fed to you. That would be extremely frustrating. What we're talking about here is discoverability. It's the use of algorithms to make some content accessible and other content not. It bumps it up or down. Sometimes it can be found on page 1, sometimes it's found on page 53. Currently, YouTube curates material based on your individual preference. It bumps it to the top of the page if you like it, if maybe you've watched similar videos in the past. What this legislation will do is it will force content, so-called Canadian content, in front of the eyeballs of Canadians at the expense of showing them the content that they actually really want. So it totally disregards Canadians' freedoms, our choice, our desire to watch certain things over others, all because the government has an agenda. Now, Canadians know what they like. They know what they want to watch. And that desire, that free will, should be respected. Now, I haven't even addressed the problem with the definition of CanCon, which is absolute ludicrous. Let's talk about that for a moment. So CanCon, Canadian content, that content that the government is actually going to put at the top of the page now, well, let's talk about that for a moment. A bilingual Canadian sitting in his Montreal condo producing YouTube videos about maple syrup and hockey, using the Canadian national anthem in the background of his video, still will not get counted as Canadian content. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
So, in fact, based on the definition of CanCon, the only ones who will receive the government stamp of approval are actually the members of the traditional media. The CRTC will define who is in and who is out, who gets noticed and who doesn't, who gets to be on page 1 and who has to get bumped to page 53. Well, your preferences as an individual, they're inconsequential. The government will decide now. In Canada, we're punching above our weight in terms of what creators are able to produce. It's absolutely jaw-breaking. Now, they literally share their talent with the world. The world. It's incredible. Lily Singh, a famous YouTuber, has pointed out that creators who have built their careers on the internet need to be consulted on these decisions, she says. She goes on to say, in trying to do what seems like a good thing, highlighting great Canadian-made content, you can unintentionally destroy a thriving creative ecosystem. Yeah. Morgan Fortier from Skyship Entertainment so eloquently puts it this way. He says, in Canada, digital content creators have built a successful, thriving industry on platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, and others that export a huge amount of Canadian content to the rest of the world. They've done this through their entrepreneurial spirit, their hard work, and largely without government interference or assistance. This achievement should be supported, celebrated, and encouraged. Bill C-11 is presented as a means to support the future of the broadcast industry, but it completely ignores all the global reach of Canada's digital success stories in favor of an antiquated, regionalized broadcast model. I'm coming in for a conclusion here. Bill C-11 is a direct attack on digital-first creators. It's a direct attack on our choice as viewers, and it's a direct attack actually on the advancement of arts and culture in Canada in the 21st century. The bill needs to die 1,000 deaths.